When I first started out, I quickly learned how to apply a decent glossy film finish, but I struggled to get consistent results with a satin or matte finish. It wasn't until I learned a little bit about what makes a finish less glossy that the light bulb went on in my head and I started getting much better and more consistent results. And in this video, I'll share some of those secrets that I had to learn the hard way. Most film finishes start out glossy. They're made less glossy by adding flattening agents. For example, you may see 3 different cans of polyurethane on the shelf. One is marked gloss, another semi-gloss, and the final one satin. It's all the same stuff. The difference is the gloss can contains no flatteners, the semi-gloss can contains some flatteners, and the satin can contains a lot of flatteners. Flattening agents are tiny particles, usually silica, that change the texture of the finish so it reflects the light differently. The way it works is actually interesting. As the finish dries, it shrinks a tiny bit on the surface. Those microscopic particles of silica within the finish disrupts how the surface shrinks, which makes it slightly pucker. So it's just a little bit rough. Not rough enough to feel, it'll still be perfectly smooth to the touch, but just rough enough to scatter the rays of light that strike it and make it appear less shiny. This is an important point to keep in mind. It's not the finish itself that is less glossy. It's the texture on the surface of that finish once it's dry. This is important for several reasons. First, it means you must fully stir a semi-gloss or satin finish to get consistent results. All those flattening agents will sink to the bottom of the can. If you don't mix it, if you just shake it a little and then dip your brush in the top of the can, you'll be using pure poly without the flatteners, and it'll end up glossy when it dries, no matter what the label said. You must fully mix it before you use it, and you must keep it stirred up as you apply it so the flatteners remain suspended throughout and don't resettle to the bottom. This is especially important with thinner finishes like wipe-on poly. For this purpose, I bought a magnetic mixer, such as you might find in a chemistry lab. You set the cup of finish on top, you drop in a little metal pellet, and you turn it on. That pellet spins in the bottom and it thoroughly stirs the finish without adding a bunch of bubbles. Sometimes I just leave the cup on the mixer as I work so it stays stirred up. Or I keep the mixer nearby and I return the cup of finish to it for a restirring every few minutes. Proper, consistent mixing will reduce streaks in your finish and it will ensure consistency from one project part to the next. I'll put a link to the mixer that I use if you did want to check it out below this video. It's also great for dissolving shellac flakes. Now, going back to the principle we discussed about how the silica particles reduce the glossiness of a finish by altering how light reflects off the surface, this means you can mix a gloss finish with a semi-gloss or satin finish. I don't mean dump them all in the same can, although I suppose you could do that if you wanted to. But let's say you want a satin sheen on a project, but you only have a little satin poly left in one can and a lot of gloss poly in another. You may use the gloss for the first couple coats, then apply a final coat of satin on top. The flatteners in that final coat will alter its surface, canceling out the glossy sheen underneath. This also means you can turn a satin sheen into a glossy one by smoothing out that microscopically rough surface created by those flatteners. The easiest way to do that would obviously be to just add a final coat of glossy finish to fill in that uneven texture, and since it does not have any flatteners in it, it won't have that same surface. Now this brings up another question that is often debated, even among experts. Is it only the rough surface on the top of the finish that has this dulling effect, or do the tiny particles of silica themselves cloud the finish throughout its thickness? Well, silica is basically quartz sand. It's tiny, colorless crystals. They do not dissolve, so in theory, the particles themselves should create a cloudy or hazy effect throughout the layers of finish, not just on the very surface. For this reason, some folks believe you should only use a semi-gloss or satin finish for your final coat. They argue that multiple layers of finish containing silica flatteners will result in a hazy effect that obscures the appearance of the wood itself. They say that instead, you should build up your finish with layers of clear gloss, and only the top coat should contain the flatteners required for the sheen you desire, and in this way you'll have a clearer, more attractive finish overall. So is this true? In theory, it makes a lot of sense. Those particles are in there. They must cloud the finish to some degree, no matter how microscopic they are. But in actual practice, I'm not sure the difference is noticeable to the untrained eye. To me, this argument is similar to the one about hand-cutting dovetails. When the average person goes into a furniture store and they pull open the drawer, they may notice the dovetails and consider that a sign of a well-made piece of furniture, but they won't know if they were cut by hand or a router jig. They won't care that it took a lot of skill to cut delicately narrow pins. Those are things we woodworkers notice, not regular folks. So if you are a highly skilled wood finisher, you may notice the subtle difference in clarity between 3 coats of satin finish and 2 coats of gloss covered by 1 coat of satin. But I guarantee whoever you made the project for won't. All they care is that it feels nice to the touch and it isn't too shiny to the eye. So let's review. Most film finishes start out glossy and are dulled by adding flattening agents which alter the way the light reflects off the surface. These flatteners must be evenly suspended in the can as you use it, so mix well and often throughout the finishing process. You may even check out that link to the magnetic mixer below. Because the sheen is determined largely by the microscopically rough surface on the top of the last coat, it matters little what is used on the lower coats. You can put satin over gloss, you can put gloss over satin. Some folks have had success wet sanding a satin finish to make it glossy. If you have a keen eye for clarity, you may wish to use gloss finish for all but the final coat, but you may be the only one who notices. See you next time. MyWoodcutters.com is the sort of small business I like to support. Stefan is a great guy, and he can find you knives and cutters for almost any joiner, planer, shaper, or molding machine. And his are the best prices if you're planning to upgrade to a helical carbide cutter head. Please use the link below this video to check with him before you buy somewhere else. Some small businesses are just worth supporting. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.